Hello and welcome to the Star Wars Guys YouTube channel where the Force is family. I am Master Paul.
And I am Epic John.
Yes, and first off, I want to say thank you guys for bearing with us. We got a bit of a late start. Jonathan was having some technical difficulties, but we figured out a way for the stream to work, so here we are. And real quick, right off the bat, I want to say hello to Angry Canadian who says, "You're starting with the OG Sonic game." Now, I know you said later on you realized it's a discussion, but yes, this is not a game stream exactly. This is a game discussion stream. So, for those that missed it, a couple weeks ago, I did a stream called Beginner Series Warhammer 40K with a friend of mine named Baron Orman Tag, who has his own channel, by the way, called Baron Orman Tag's Fandomology. Yes, I gave him that name. And we basically did sort of an introductory discussion on Warhammer 40K. And now Jonathan and I are back to do the same thing for one of Jonathan's favorite franchises, Sonic the Hedgehog. And yes, this is going to be a weekly thing. What next week's is, I don't know yet, but stay tuned. And hello also to the Matt Cave. Thanks for joining. Who also says Sonic is one of my favorite series of games. Still play it on my Genesis. Yep, we're going to be talking about all of that. So, first off, John, let's talk about this. This isn't even one of my bullet points yet. But how did you first hear about Sonic the Hedgehog?
Well, I actually heard about it from a school friend who was telling me how great one of the games was. And I remembered that during the COVID 2020 pandemic, and with nothing else to do, I decided, hey, I'll visit this series.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what was the first game you played?
Sonic Mania.
Okay. I think for me, it was so long ago, I genuinely do not remember when I first heard of Sonic the Hedgehog. We just lost Jonathan. Bear with us, guys. We're going to try and get him back. Phil just popped in saying, Coach is an easy mode player, confirmed. Yes, I heard. I was there for that stream. Nice to see your pillows are at military standard. Yeah, which is funny because I actually had to take a bit of a power nap before this stream. I've been really tired these past couple days. So give me a quick second while I text John and see what happened. So while John is getting back in here, I'll talk, of course, about how I heard about. Oh, there he is.
I am
Everything
so
okay?
sorry about that. I accidentally hit the leave button.
Hey, it's fine. As long as it was that and not something else like your internet shutting down. So anyways, I was getting into a little bit of how I first heard about Sonic, which I genuinely do not remember because it was so long ago. I do know back when I was in high school was around the time that the first two or three Sonic games got ported to the iPhone. And so I decided to check those out. And I I think I probably played Sonic 1 the most out of all of them. And I enjoyed it, but I had a tough time with that game. And honestly still do because that game can be quite unforgiving with the whole thing of you lose all your rings when you get hurt, and if you get hurt again, you're dead. So I have not been the biggest Sonic fan until recently, honestly, when of course the movies came out, which we've already talked about on this channel. I like them. And then, of course, the newest game, Sonic Frontiers, is out. I will be streaming that on the channel at some point. And then, of course, the new show, Sonic Prime. So I'm slowly becoming more and more of a Sonic fan. So again, just like the last beginner series, this this whole Sonic for beginners concept is just as much is for me as it is for anyone watching that's not gotten into Sonic and would like to know where to start. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our first bullet point of the stream, which just in general What is Sonic the Hedgehog?
So for me, Sonic the Hedgehog is a game series about a fast hedgehog
Hmm.
with good stories sometimes.
Okay. And I think we can both agree that Sonic was started basically as direct competition to Mario because Sonic, I looked this up just before the stream. Sonic, the first game came out in 1991 on the Sega Genesis. And if I'm not mistaken, 1991 would have been around the time that Super Mario World had come out on the SNES, correct?
I think, if I remember correctly, Mario World came before, well, after Sonic 1, and the Sega Genesis was originally intended to compete with the SNES, well, with the normal NES. And by
I
that
did.
metric, it succeeded in every way. It was better in every way.
Okay, so I just looked it up. Super Mario World came out in North America in 1991, specifically the 23rd of August. Now, by comparison, when did the original Sonic come out? Let me look that up real quick. The original Sonic came out June 23rd, 1991. So Sonic actually came first between those two games. And by the way, hello to Alan Copeland. Thanks for joining. So at the very least, you could almost say that Sonic, by this point, obviously in Mario's history, we had the original Super Mario Brothers, that weird version of Super Mario 2 where you play as Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Peach, as well as the super hard Lost levels, and Super Mario Brothers 3.
We don't talk about lost levels.
That is true.
They were
But
lost, never to be found.
exactly. So yeah, it naturally makes sense that Sega would want to come up with their own iconic protagonist that has that cartoony look, kind of like Mario does, and would be their platforming, staple. And that's pretty much what Sonic the Hedgehog became. But it's very interesting that they took the route of a very fast blue hedgehog because hedgehogs in real life, obviously, they're not very fast and they certainly are not blue. In fact, the only thing that they have in common with Sonic the Hedgehog is that they roll up into a little ball. So, why do you think they chose specifically the route of a blue hedgehog that's super fast?
Uh, well, you have to understand the Sega Genesis was marketed on its blast processing. So what better way to showcase that when with a fast-paced game?
That okay, that I actually didn't know. Wow. Do you happen to know just how much faster it was at processing compared to the SNES or the Nintendo Entertainment System?
No, I do not.
Okay. Anyone that had those systems like Matt Cave, I know you probably had them. Any information that you would have on that would be greatly appreciated. All right.
Also, I think they tried to go for the Mickey Mouse appeal
Oh,
of
right.
a iconic, simple design.
Based around a humanoid animal type character.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense then. All right. Now, of course, the series has progressed far beyond that now, while also keeping in touch with its past, and we'll get into that later. But now Sonic encompasses multiple games across just about all the generations of console systems, as well as several TV shows, comics, and now even movies. And of course, welcome back to Angry Canadian. So, now that we have sort of a baseline as to what Sonic is, I'm actually no, we're gonna keep it as a head. Let's talk now. about the characters. We're not going to go over every single character, just the important ones. But of course, we're going to start with Sonic himself. So, from my point of view, Sonic is your stereotypical 14-year-old, teenager in blue hedgehog form with the attitude to match. He's cocky, he's ambitious, he knows that he has this super speed power, and he knows that he could run circles around everyone, and he's going to let you know about it. But he's also not insufferable about it either. He's still a good person deep down. Would you say that's a good summation of it?
Yes.
Okay. So how would you best describe then the character of Sonic?
I'd say that he's a little bit of a show off, and he's the kind of guy who takes time not just to do something well, but to look good doing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And they've kept, at least from what I can tell in doing my research for this stream, they've kept that same attitude with some growth and maturity along the way, but they've kept that same attitude pretty much throughout all of Sonic's appearances, right?
Yeah.
All right. So,
And going back to the marketing, that was actually one of the best things for Sega because they were able to paint Mario as a legalistic teacher's pet, if you will.
Mario as a teacher's pet compared to Sonic.
Yeah.
I would have never thought about that comparison. Okay. All right, next character I want to get into is, of course, the overarching villain of the series, Dr. And depending on how you know him, either Dr. Robotnik or Dr. Eggman. So first off, can you explain why he has those two different names?
I can. In Japan, he was always known as Eggman, just always.
Okay,
In the US, they wanted to come up with something cooler, so they came up with Robotnik. However,
right.
in Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic calls him Eggman to make fun of him, and in Adventure 2, he fully adopts Eggman.
And in pretty much every version, mostly that's what he's known as since.
Yes.
Okay. Like I definitely know in the two cartoon shows that came out in the 90s, that's what he was known as is Robotnik. And again, we'll talk about those a little bit later. So Robotnik slash Eggman being the villain of the series, he is out to basically infest the world of Mobius, at least from what I can tell, with machines and robots powered by the wildlife of the area. Like I know, for example, in the first game, anytime you destroy a robot, a little bird or like a little seal or something pops out of it as if you just freed it. So, what can you tell me about that?
Uh, Not much. I think it's just a design choice to make Robotnik seem evil.
Hmm.
I can't tell you much about why they did that or his personal motivation to do that.
Right. And at least in the games that I've played, that's not always the case. Like for example, in Sonic Frontiers, the robots are just robots. There's no animal inside them. And yet in Sonic Prime, the TV show, spoiler alert, the alternate uni do you care if I spoil it since you haven't seen it?
No.
Okay. I had to double check. So, you know what, here, I'll even go with the full clip. Spoiler alert for Sonic Prime. There's an alternate universe version of Amy that's become a cyborg that keeps a tiny little bird inside her chest cavity as a prisoner. And apparently that's what powers her, something I don't know. But anyways, um, the fact that he's imprisoning these tiny little creatures inside these machines says a lot about his character, that he is very much industry minded and technology minded over preserving nature, would you say?
Yes.
Okay. And then as far as how he acts and his mannerisms, how best would you describe him?
He's in his best appearances, he's able to strike the perfect chord between goofy and still menacing.
Right. And I think the best version that I can think of, at least, that does this is the movie version. And of course, all props to that go to Jim Carrey for how he portrays Dr. Eggman, which Jim Carrey is going to go out of the way to give the best performance that he can. Yes, it sometimes might not hit right. For example, the Riddler, or if we're being honest, the Grinch, but he's going to give it his all. And I think it's safe to say that the role of Eggman kind of revived his career, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd say so. To be honest, I think Jim Carrey is the perfect fit. Like,
Yes.
could you
And
imagine someone like The Rock playing him?
oh God, no.
Exactly.
Just no. All right, so that's Dr. Eggman. Now let's talk about some of Sonic's friends, starting with Tails, or his full name, Miles Tails Prower. Now, Tails is a fox that was born with two tails and is somehow able to break the laws of physics by using both of his two tails as a helicopter. So, what can you tell me about him?
He looks up to Sonic as if he's an older brother and needs guidance a lot of the time.
Hmm.
However, he's very smart, and in his best appearances, he's shown that he is just as capable as Sonic.
Right. Like, he's the one that comes up with all of the different machines and gadgets that aid Sonic during his journey. And aside from being able to fly on his own with his tails, he also has a plane called the Tornado that he's a very good pilot with.
Right.
So Tails, from what I can gather in my research, he's also kind of run the gambit as far as how he's been portrayed as either a strong character in its own right to unfortunately kind of weak. So, what can you tell me about that?
Uh, some people, well, some writers didn't know how to portray Tails in comparison to Sonic, so they just made him all brain, no brawn.
Right. Like I know, for example, in Sonic Prime, a lot of people hate this moment. There's a scene where he's snuck up on behind by one of the major enemies of the series, Chaos, and all he does is turn and cower in fear.
That was Sonic Forces, but yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're going to notice that you guys watching this are going to notice that a lot, that Sonic pretty much stays consistent, but the side characters are portrayed to varying degrees of success. Would you agree with that, John?
Yes.
All right. Next character we're going to talk about is Amy. Amy is another hedgehog, and she is the main female protagonist of the series, and let's just say is Sonic's biggest fan. And again, she has been portrayed in varying degrees of success, either as a character in her own right that, you know, wants to look out for the little guy, to a hyper obsessed fangirl of Sonic. So, what can you tell me about Amy, John?
Personally, I think that her best appearance was in Sonic Frontiers and Sonic Adventure 2,
Okay. And why do you say that?
because in Sonic Frontiers, she hardly fangirls over Sonic and isn't annoying. She gives like helpful advice and is shown to care about the Coco. In
Yes, which
Sonic
are the
Adventure 2, she's the one who would eventually turn Shadow to good.
and if I'm not, and we'll talk about him in just a moment. And also, if I'm not mistaken, in Sonic Adventure 1, a lot of her story revolves around just helping out this little bird. Is that correct?
Yeah, and in Sonic Adventure 1, she helps a robot named Gamma turn good.
Right. And also, as far as her abilities, she is able to use this giant hammer, which I didn't learn this until reading the IDW comics. Apparently, it is literally called the Pico Pico hammer,
Which means love.
allegedly. But anyways, on the opposite end of the scale, what's an example of Amy done wrong?
Uh, Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Uh, I'd say Sonic Heroes
Okay, and why is that Amy done wrong?
because she's more or less reduced to a fangirl of Sonic.
Yes, like super hyper clingy, you know, being aggressively
Sonic, will
like
you
you're gonna,
marry me?
yeah, which mm, which yeah, I haven't played those games, but I can see where that would get annoying. All right, so next character, and again another one that's done bad. Real quick, Angry Canadian says, I agree, Epic John. Amy in Frontiers is great. Yes, another character that was great in Frontiers. In fact, my personal favorite character as far as the side characters from Frontiers is Knuckles. Now, Knuckles is kind of interesting because he was kind of the first in a trend of characters that are introduced as villains, but then by the end of the story switch sides and team up with Sonic, right? Because if I'm
Yes,
not because
and
if I'm not mistaken, he was introduced in Sonic 3 and was the villain, right?
yes, influence, but villain.
Okay. So what can you tell me about that?
So when he's done right, he's not dumb, but he isn't socially aware.
Hmm. Which
Like
again, great examples of this is the movies and Sonic Frontiers.
him and Sonic kind of joke around with each other a little, as seen in Frontiers, and I think his best appearances were Frontiers and Sonic Adventure 1 and 2.
Okay. Now, where did the whole trope of Knuckles being an idiot start?
Uh, I think it started in Unleashed, and then it was very apparent in Sonic Forces, where his big plan, called Big Wave,
I heard about this one.
is literally to just bum rush a city that they know nothing about. And then, you know what's resultant of this plan?
They get decimated.
90% of the resistance dies. And guess how
Wow.
long it takes him to come up with this plan?
A minute and a half.
Yup, a minute and a half.
Angry Canadian says the dumb Knuckles trope is dumb. Knuckles in Sonic X is the best version of Knuckles, in my opinion. Okay. What little I have, well, I'm not going to say little. I've seen about half of season one of Sonic X, and I do tend to agree. It's not my personal favorite, but it's definitely up there. But um, one dumb scene though with Knuckles that really surprised me that they actually did this actually comes from Sonic Boom, which overall is not looked upon very well at all by the Sonic fans.
The
But
show or
Knuckles
the
is,
game?
I think, all of them.
Yeah.
But it's a scene where Knuckles is running and he's going left, and he literally holds out both his hands like this to tell which one is left.
Like, you should not need to do that.
Exactly.
And even if you do, you be more discreet about it so people don't think you're an idiot.
Mm-hmm. So, next character we're going to go over is Shadow. And again, this is another character that, at least according to my research, was introduced as the villain, specifically as the villain of Sonic Adventure 2. But by the end, he becomes a good guy and is willing to team up, at least begrudgingly, with Sonic. And he also is one that has been done very inconsistently. So, what's your take, John?
Do you mind me spoiling the end of Adventure 2?
Go ahead.
So, what's different about Knuckles and Eggman and Shadow and Eggman is that Eggman is the one pretty much controlling Knuckles. But in
Mm-hmm.
Adventure 2, Shadow is the one controlling Eggman.
Really?
He has. Now, this is all backstory stuff, which do you mind if I get into?
Go ahead. Just try and keep it as brief as possible.
So, he was born on the Ark. Well, he was created on the Ark by Eggman's grandfather. And Eggman's cousin, Maria, was pretty much his best friend. When the military raided the Ark, Maria saved him and sealed her own fate. And Gerald, Eggman's grandfather, was able to use that to pervert what she had asked him to do and convince him that he needed to take revenge on humanity.
Hmm. When in reality, she wanted him to save humanity, correct?
Yeah.
Huh.
So he pretty much controls everything up until Gerald's failsafe, the Bio Lizard, has to get in action. And
Okay.
then he realizes through Amy what Maria had truly asked and teams up with Sonic not begrudgingly.
Because he realizes it's the right thing to do, right?
Yes,
Okay. So that sounds like a good example of Shadow done right. What's an example of Shadow done wrong?
his own game
Yeah, I heard they gave him a gun for whatever reason.
and made him say the not so PG version of dang every 10 seconds.
Hmm. Real quick, Angry Canadian in the chat says Shadow the Hedgehog game is amazing, even if people find it cringy. Hmm.
Personally, I kind of want to get the Shadow the Hedgehog game, even if it's good ironically.
Fair enough. So, real quick about abilities. Shadow is just as fast as Sonic, but weirdly, he doesn't just run. He seems to like skate. So, what's going on with that?
He's ever so slightly slower so that Sonic can actually keep the fastest thing alive title,
Uh huh.
but he's actually using some hover shoes, which I think release I think make it so that there's not as much tension on the ground, so it's like he's on ice.
Hmm.
And you have to
Okay.
admit, his running animation is smooth.
Yes, it is. And he's also able to use something called the Chaos Emeralds, and he does something called Chaos Control. Now, my first seeing this has been through Smash Brothers because he's an assist trophy, and he weirdly makes your character or the opposite character slow down. What is Chaos Control exactly?
Uh, Pretty much, it can warp space and time to the user's will. It can teleport an object anywhere. It can create portals even to the future. It can it can slow down time so you can save somebody. It has a lot of utility.
Hmm. Okay. And also another thing I forgot to go over with Knuckles, his abilities. So Knuckles, by his name, has giant, oversized knuckles, and I didn't realize this until I saw the movie. But you know how every character in Sonic that's an animal wears some form of white glove? And real
Yeah.
quick, we do not need any of those users coming in here, those bots. But so those white gloves, I didn't realize this until I saw the movie. But Knuckles wears boxing gloves with the giant knuckle spikes sticking out of them. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like on the one hand, it makes sense because his attacks are punching based, but on the other, how do you use your individual fingers?
I'm assuming that the glove has enough flex in the open and close so that you can grab stuff.
I guess. I don't know. I'm not saying I hate it. It's just a little weird to me. So, another thing he can do with his knuckles is punch them into the side of the wall and like climb with that. And this one really caught me by surprise in Sonic Adventure 2, he's able to glide. How does that work?
I'm thinking since Knuckles' spikes are somewhat aerodynamically designed, he can do that. But
Hmm.
with his punching and climbing ability, I think that just the fact that he's strong enough and the fact that he has those spikes permits him to do that.
I see. Okay. And then the last thing we're going to talk about, this isn't character related, but it is something I want to touch on, and that is just the Chaos Emeralds themselves. Now, real quick, I'm going to throw this up again because we're going to get it heavily into stuff by the Sonic Frontiers regarding the Chaos Emeralds. So first off, what are they?
So, if you've seen the movie, you know that the Chaos Emeralds forged into the Master Emerald. That is not the case in the games.
Hmm.
I need to clarify that because both PJ and Michael thought that.
Right, which I like the idea now of the Chaos Emeralds being a separate entity entirety from the Master Emerald. Almost like, to use a Lord of the Rings comparison, like you have the 3 elven rings, the 7 dwarven rings, and the 9 rings of men, and then off to the side you have the 1 ring to rule them all, instead of the other rings becoming the 1 ring.
So, yeah, going with that, the Master Emerald has the ability of neutralizing or multiplying the effects of the Chaos Emeralds.
Hmm.
So, if you take all 7 Chaos Emeralds and their power level is 1, the Master Emeralds would be 7.
Okay. And what?
And
Oh, go ahead.
no, I've lost my train of thought.
Okay, sorry about that. Now, when Sonic is able to collect all of the Chaos Emeralds, he's able to transform into his supersonic mode, which is literally him turned golden with red eyes. And basically he's that world's version of Superman. Would you say that's a accurate description?
Yeah,
Now he can only use, at least as far as gameplay goes, he can only use super form for a limited amount of time. Like at least in Sonic Frontiers, your ring counter is a timer. So as the longer that you're in supersonic mode, your ring counter goes down until you hit 0, and then it stops.
right.
So
So
what else can you tell me about supersonic?
one thing, Sonic is not normally able to fly. In
Okay.
super mode, he can.
Yes.
And his attacks do more damage. I don't know how much. I don't know how much more. Wait, I think I remember I think if we do the math with Sonic's attacks damage in normal mode in Sonic Frontiers and super mode, it's a 60 times attack boost.
Hmm.
Just if we use the math.
Okay. So other characters can use the super mode too, like Knuckles and Shadow, right?
Yes, Tails has used it before, and Silver has used it before.
Right.
We haven't seen Amy do it.
Which could theoretically happen, but I don't know if it's very likely. So real quick, let's talk about a couple other characters, just real briefly, starting with the guy that you have as your avatar, Metal Sonic. He was originated in Sonic CD, the same game, by the way, that Amy originated in. So what can you tell me about Metal Sonic?
He is he's either programmed or he just thinks that he is the real Sonic.
Okay.
And that is his primary motivation. He wants to get rid of fake Sonic because he is real Sonic.
Okay. So what games does he so what's some good notable games that he's in aside from Sonic CD?
Sonic Heroes, he's actually the main villain, but that doesn't get revealed till the last story.
Right. Phil McCracken in the chat says Sonic is good, but Skyrim is better. I know, Phil. I know.
I'm hanging on to the other side.
We'll probably get back into Skyrim. I'm thinking Wednesday. I would do it tonight, but Tim invited me on a stream at 10 o'clock, so I'm going to keep that commitment. But Wednesday, Skyrim will come back. And then, of course, you already mentioned him, Silver. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Silver is a time traveling hedgehog. He comes from the far future, and he was introduced in Sonic 06, which again, we'll talk about that in a moment. But he was another character that started out as, for all intents and purposes, the bad guy, only to turn around later and become the good guy, right?
Yes, him and Knuckles are sort of in a similar position with being isolated and not having great social skills. Because Knuckles grew up alone on Angel Island, and Silver grew up with only Blaze in the far future. I'd honestly debate that Silver has worse social issues because of sort of the hopelessness of the far future,
Mm-hmm.
but neither here nor there.
Okay, fair enough.
That's how Mephiles is able to influence him.
Phil says, and now to complete my Wednesday, coupons and Knuckles is cool. Yes. All right, so I think that's all of the characters that are actually important. Now let's move on to the different game eras and game recommendations. So, in doing my research, I learned that there's a couple different eras. We have the classic era, which are all the ones that are the original 2D platformers. There's the adventure era, which I believe encompasses Sonic Adventures 1 and 2 and Sonic Heroes. Then there's the dark era that I believe covers the mid to late 2000s and includes games like Sonic and the Secret Ring, Sonic the Black Knight, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic 06, I believe is part of that.
Sonic 06 started, in many people's eyes, the dark era.
Yes. And then there's the Colors era, which includes everything before Sonic Frontiers. I think Sonic Frontiers is starting its own new era, would you say?
Maybe.
It all depends on what game follows it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the different game eras. Obviously, the classic era speaks for themselves. That's the era that just about everyone loves. Same with the adventure era too, right?
Yeah, the adventure era has a little bit of criticism because of mouths not syncing with cutscenes, but it's an early GameCube game. What do you expect?
Yeah, which even then it wasn't supposed to be on the GameCube. It was originally on the Sega this
Dreamcast.
Dreamcast, right? Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, but for the most part everyone likes it. The dark era is where we start to have some issues. So let's rip the band-aid off. Sonic 06. A lot of people hate that game, and I've never understood why. So what can you tell me about that, John?
Now, personally, I've not played it, but I think the reason is the long load times and the glitches.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a fight against Silver that a lot of people don't like in that either, right?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of people think that Sonic 06 is the worst Sonic game of all time. Would you agree with that statement, or do you think there's one that's worse?
Just because of how bad of a taste in my mouth it left, I think Sonic Boom is just slightly worse.
And why do you say that?
Because Sonic 06 had a pretty serviceable story.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic Boom, on the other hand, from what I was able to get through, did not.
Hmm. Interesting. Angry Canadian says, from the Dark Era, Unleashed plus Black Knight are good games. Unleashed has the best music for daytime stages in that era. Hmm. Okay. And then we have what people like to call the Colors era, starting, of course, with Sonic Colors, progressing to at least Sonic Forces, if not including Sonic Frontiers. And people don't really look from what I've gathered, people don't really care for the Colors era also. Can you tell me why that might be?
It sort of feels like storytelling went to the wayside in the Colors era.
Like they dumbed down the games and tried to make them for kids more?
Yes,
Okay. And the Colors era is what Sonic Boom is from, right?
yes.
Yeah, that game is
Though
very
it's
much a
not
kid's
canon.
game. It's not.
Well, yeah, Sonic Boom is not canon.
Okay. Was
They
it like
were going
that
to
from
make
the
it canon if it succeeded, but it didn't
and they
succeed.
decided no.
Yeah,
And yet somehow Sonic Boom not only got one game, but it got two games. One on the Wii U, which you have, you're welcome. The other on the
had.
3DS. And then a TV show on Cartoon Network. So they sunk some money into this.
Yeah, they were trying to redo Sonic and it didn't work out.
Hmm.
It's like if Mario started, it's like if Mario
It's like
decided,
it's like if Mario was actually father and son with Luigi, and their last names were Mario.
yeah, and I saw some thing making fun of it, but it's like if they made Luigi a muscular guy. Like, no, that don't work.
Fair enough. All right, and then a lot of people, for a lot of people, Sonic Forces was like the last straw. Can you tell me a little bit about why that is?
Well, Sonic Forces had a lot of missed potential
Okay.
and some blatant advertising to get adventure fans hyped.
Hmm.
A lot of the marketing showed all of the old villains coming back, with two of them being from the adventure era, Shadow and
Uh-huh.
Chaos. And I think that they did this on purpose to get adventure fans hyped.
Okay.
But a lot of the issues of the game stemmed from its very short runtime and the story being awful.
Hmm. All right. Fair enough. Because of course you already know I'm currently playing through Sonic Forces for the first time, and yes, I can definitely see how it is a step down from Sonic Frontiers, which I just finished. And I'm gonna stick it out, see what happens. But at the same time, in the Colors era, we also got games that people really like Sonic Mania. And if I understand, that one actually had a unique story because, at least from a development standpoint, because the developers of Sonic Mania were actually people that started doing Sonic fan games. Am I right?
I haven't heard that, but it's probably true, as
Okay.
it's public knowledge that Christian Whitehead is a Sonic fan and a
And
big
he
one.
was and he was the guy that was the head developer for Sonic Mania, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, let's do this. What is Let's take each era and think of at least one game that you would recommend playing and then one game that you would not recommend playing. So, obviously the classic era, at least from what I can tell, play all of them, right?
Yes. If Sonic CD is probably the weakest out of all of them, but it's not bad by any means.
Not to mention Sonic CD, as we've already said, gives us the very first appearance of Amy and Metal Sonic. So at
Yeah.
least it's still bringing something, valuable to the table.
Yeah, one Sonic robot to rule them all.
Yes.
The one
So
that
that
we'll
being
see for 30 years.
so that being said, the adventure era. What's at least one game you recommend and then one you recommend to stay away from?
Highly recommend Sonic Adventure 2. Highly.
Okay.
It's my
And side question, you've already answered this for me, but for the sake of the audience, if you go straight to Sonic Adventure 2 without having played Sonic Adventure 1, are you going to be confused?
no. Adventure 2 only makes references to Adventure 1's story, but it's not a direct continuation.
Okay, fair enough. And then one that you would stay away from in the adventure era.
Uh, Probably Shadow the Hedgehog,
Okay.
just
Wait,
because of
I thought that was
how
I thought that was dark era.
Shadow the Hedgehog came before Sonic 06.
Okay, fair enough. All right. And then the Dark Era. At least one that you would recommend playing, and then one you recommend staying away from.
I would recommend that you play Unleashed specifically on the Wii because it makes
Okay.
nighttime stages much better. Because
All
you
right.
see, the whole reason they did Werehog was to hop on the trend of action games like the original three God of Wars.
Interesting. Okay.
So play it on the Wii. If you play it on the Xbox or the PS3, those nighttime stages are going to take a very, very long time.
All right. Fair enough. And then, um, what Dark Era game? This is kind of an obvious one, but what would you recommend staying away from?
All of them. I'm kidding. Uh, Secret Rings and Black Knight, don't do it. '06 is a weird case because I've told you this in private, but for the sake of
Hmm.
the audience, there is a fan game being made, still in works, but it seeks to remake Sonic '06 from the ground up, still tell the game's story, and flesh everything out. If you want to play Sonic '06, play that.
All right. Fair enough. And then finally, the Colors Era. What's at least one game you do recommend playing, and then one you do not recommend playing?
I'd say Generations and Frontiers and Colors itself are good games.
And Mania, right?
And Mania.
Okay. And then ones to stay away from.
Sonic Boom and Sonic Forces. Well, both Sonic Boom games.
All right, fair enough. All right, so that's it for that point. Let's move on now to other medias. So Sonic, as we've already mentioned, exists also outside of video games. There is the two movies that have come out, which let's talk about those for a second. What did you first think when you heard that Sonic was going to get a movie?
This might be interesting because
Okay.
at this point I was not a Sonic fan.
Yeah, I had tried around this point to get into it with varying degrees of success, and then we of course saw that first trailer with the bad design of Sonic, and
YouTube,
the
if they removed dislikes 2 years or later,
but
2 years
the thing
earlier.
is, yeah, but the thing is, of course, the people making the movies listened to us and said, "Okay, we hear you. You don't like this Sonic design. We'll push the movie back a little bit further and completely rework it from the ground up, and thus we get the design that we have now." And props to them for doing that. And
Yes,
overall,
they
and over. Oh yeah, go ahead.
there's some people who say that that was a marketing stunt, but personally I don't because the move cost them, I think, $5 million because they would have to redo almost every scene
I
so far
believe
as
it.
CGI.
But again, the fact that they were willing to spend that extra money is, says a lot about them because they could have just as easily said, forget you, this is what we're going with. And I think the movie would have bombed if they had done that.
Yes, I think the people making the movies had a lot of passion for it because a lot of video game movies come out and they are horrible.
Right. Which I've certainly, had my reservations about it. And I'm still kind of dubious, we'll say, regarding the upcoming Mario movie coming out. But If it's done in the same spirit as the two Sonic movies are, then I think we're all good. And then, of course, the second movie came out, which introduced both Knuckles and Tails into the movies. And you made mention of this too, that you liked very much how Knuckles was done, right?
Yes, because he wasn't dumb, but he was still socially unaware. It's like if
Because
somebody had to go through a 2020 pandemic, but all of their life. Because we
makes
all know
sense.
how the 2020 pandemic was.
Yes. Now, aside from the movies, there's also some TV shows. There was two that came out in the 90s. Funny enough, both
PJ took the
voiced.
chat.
I see it. I got it.
Thank you.
Um,
You were saying?
both shows aired around the same time and both starred the same voice actor, Jalil White, who, yes, is the guy that played Steve Urkel. And both shows aired around the same time. One was called The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. The other is just called Sonic the Hedgehog, or other people know it as Sonic Sat AM. Now, have you seen even a little bit of either of these shows?
Nope.
Okay.
I
I
don't even
saw
know where to start.
I saw a little bit of Sonic Sat AM and liked what I saw, especially because they introduced characters that we haven't seen in the games. For example, Sally Acorn, and this one fox that speaks in a French accent that wears a French uniform. I can't remember what his name is. And the basic consensus that I can gather about both shows is that Sonic Sat AM is seen as the far superior of the two shows. That the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, the best way that I can explain it that you would understand, John, is it has it's a lot like the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, but somehow twice as insane. Can you imagine that?
Super Mario Bros. Super Show it was fun.
It was fun, but kind of crazy too.
Like, was it good? Probably not. Was it fun? Yes.
Yes. And funny enough, we'll be covering that show very soon on this channel for Animation Friday. But
Do the
anyways,
Mario.
oh my god, that's one of the cringiest songs ever. But anyways, getting back to it, there's been other shows revolved around Sonic 2. For example, we already mentioned it. There was a Sonic Boom show, which itself, at least that I know of, introduced its own character called Styx the Badger. And I I thought the show and the character were both okay, but they really didn't do anything substantial for me. And of course, hello in
Yeah,
the chat to
what I
Nova
was able to
Fawn.
watch,
Go ahead.
what I was able to watch was it, it was not my favorite show that they did on Cartoon Network.
Fair enough.
Though to be
No,
completely fair, I did like my favorite show was actually old reruns of classic Tom and Jerry episodes. So what do you
same.
do?
Nova says, never played Sonic. I don't think we owned a Sega Genesis. My sons did watch the Sonic show from time to time. And then, of course, there just recently came out a new Sonic show on Netflix called Sonic Prime, which I will say this, I've seen the whole season, and for a kids show, it is really good. Like it's better than the average kids show, but it's not, you know, it's certainly not Arcane. We'll put it that way. Which, John, you haven't yet seen Arcane. I would wait a couple years before you do that. Oh, and also I forgot about this one. There was actually a Sonic anime that came out called Sonic X. Have you seen any of that, John?
I think I saw the first two episodes of it.
And what did you remember thinking?
This is a little boring,
Okay.
but I
I
might give it another try.
I would actually recommend doing that. I would say about a good 18 episodes in, and it's definitely it's definitely got its moments that I have enjoyed. Some that I kind of wince at a little bit just because of the animation style and the voice acting style. It's kind of an acquired taste, the whole anime style, but overall I've liked it. And then of course there's Sonic the Hedgehog comics, and two different companies that I know of were in charge of the Sonic comics, but all of them seem to be headed up by one guy. I believe his name is, correct me if I'm wrong, John, Ian Flynn. Does that sound
Yes, I've
about
heard
right?
of him.
And he's also the guy that spearheaded the production of Sonic Frontiers from a narrative standpoint. I have read the entirety of the Sonic IDW series, which I cannot recommend that highly enough if you are a Sonic fan. You can get it for free. You can get both complete omnibuses, if I said that word right, on Kindle for free. And the third one's going to be coming out, I believe, in March. So definitely look for that. So, kind of to wrap all this up, let's talk now. And this could step on some toes, so I apologize.
Can we?
Let's talk. Go ahead, John.
So there's also Archie comics. They did Sonic comics, I think.
Uh huh.
I think those are weird, but Power Scalers seem to really like Archie Sonic, so
Fair enough.
yeah.
And hello to Resolute Rebellion, who says, my son watched the Sonic Prime and he said it was pretty good. Yeah, as a show, I'd give it a good 8 out of 10. So now, John, let's talk about the fan base. And you and I have had some some conversations about this offline. And this is going to step on some toes. There's no easy way to say this, but I say this with all the respect due. But the Sonic fan base, from what I have heard, is one of the most toxic fan bases. I hate using that word, but it's the only word that comes to mind. Would you say that is true, John?
Yes.
And why would you say that is?
Well, I just think that a lot of them don't know how to accept that entertainment can be bad.
Okay. And can you give me some examples of this where there's a piece of Sonic entertainment that is bad, but they can't accept it.
I'd say Sonic Forces.
Okay. So Sonic Forces we've already talked about, a lot of people look down on, but there's also a section of the fan base that loves that game, right?
There's a section of the game that loves it, and there's a section of the game that thinks it's average.
Okay. And and we want to make this clear. Neither opinion is wrong. If you can like what you like and dislike what you dislike, but obviously you don't attack people for it. And I take it
Yes,
that Sonic fans do that quite a lot.
yes.
Okay. So, and again, this is nothing new for fan bases. Heck, you and I are both part of the Star Wars fan base, and literally just type in Star Wars to YouTube and you will see just how divided the fan base is. There's either people that love everything that say Disney has done, people that hate everything that Disney has done, and then our channel that tries to find a good comfortable spot in the middle.
I had to pretty much leave the Splatoon fandom because a lot of people made issues of real life stuff in that fandom.
I see. Well, basically with any fandom that's been around as long as Sonic, you're going to have basically little factions within the fandom, and basically what we're saying is just tread lightly. So I think that is a good place to go ahead and end the stream. So I hope this has been a more than sufficient first education, we'll say, into Sonic the Hedgehog. I hope we didn't go too deep into this one. Like I said earlier to Jonathan, we basically wanted to go a few steps beyond getting our feet wet, but not do a complete deep dive. And I hope we have managed to do that successfully. And for you guys that were looking to get into Sonic, I hope that we have convinced you to get into Sonic, especially now that there's both a new game, a new show, and two movies that are out now. In fact,
Yeah, there's a
let's do this, John. Final question before we get out of here. What one area of Sonic the Hedgehog's franchise, be it a specific game or the movies or the shows or the comics, where is a good place to start for someone experiencing their first anything with Sonic?
well, I'd say it's the movies because you can get them on streaming services and you can buy them for and you can buy the movies for cheap. You can buy the movies for less than what you could track down games for. So I'd say if you're interested, watch the movies because it's a low risk, see what you like.
All right, that makes sense. And if you watch the movies and you like them, but that's as far as you want to take it, hey, that's fine. In my eyes, you are no less a Sonic fan than someone that has consumed every piece of Sonic media out there. So with that, we're going to go ahead and end this. So make sure to come back tomorrow at 8 p.m. when we bring back Tuesday Night Trek. We'll be continuing our discussion on, of course, Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Wednesday, we're going to be bringing another Skyrim stream to you. And then from there, we'll keep on going. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And just remember, everyone, the Force is family. And you got to go fast. That's Sonic's catchphrase, right?
Yes.
All right. See you guys later.